So on your screen, you're seeing kind of my assignment for today. If I'm doing what I want to do, you folks will believe being able to create a basic T-table that matches your skills with the needed skills listed on the job description. And by the way, I know that sometimes some of you have covered this before, and it might be a little frustrating to go through it again, but there's a reason, there's a method to my madness. This is a sincerely important thing, particularly if you are a experienced worker that might be running up against the perception of age discrimination. We'll talk a little bit about that. The other thing I want you to be able to do when you leave today is be able to name three advantages of networking. And I know, again, a lot of people talk about it, but there's a reason they do. Now, going back to this idea of being seen as overqualified, being able to understand when and why it's important to leave off experience and qualifications that go beyond the company's needs, because that is tied together with the next bullet point, which is being able to avoid common pitfalls of being seen as overqualified. Okay, so we're going to be dealing with that as well. And then finally, at the end, successfully keep the momentum of the job search going for as long as it takes, because that can be a little bit challenging as well. Now, we're going to start with some good news, because I realize that it just seems like these days everything is bad news in one variation or another. So we are going to be starting with some good news. But before we do that, before we get to the good news, I want to hear from you. And I want to hear from you in just one word. So do me a favor to get us going here. In the chat box, and some of you have already been greeting people and talking with us in the chat box, and that's fantastic. For those of you who are doing a webinar for the first time, this is good practice to use the chat box. What I would like you to do is, I would like you to, in the chat box, describe job searching over the age of 40 or 50 in just one word. Just one word. All right. And of course, I don't need to remind you, but I will anyway. Don't use any words you wouldn't use in a professional interview. Okay, daunting, frustrating, challenging, confusing, demoralizing, overwhelming. Oh dear. Wow, Robin, you said you were going to start with positive stuff. Challenging, overqualified, disappointing, difficult, tough, hard. All righty. Yeah, keep those coming. Lovely little symbols. I know exactly what's going through your mind. Okay. All right, fair enough. Thank you, guys. All of these are good. All of these are completely relevant. What I hope, and it really depends on the group that I'm in. Every now and then I get a group very much like this, where it's kind of more on the negative side and more on the, this is going to be really difficult. Every now and then I get some glass half full people, and they say opportunities and kind of fun and that kind of thing. My feeling, honestly, guys, is if you're feeling that it's more on the negative side, you're probably with the majority. And I've certainly felt that as well. It doesn't have to be that way. And I guess I hope today you will leave feeling a little more empowered. That's my hope. I don't want to set the bar too high for my expectations for what we're going to accomplish in 60 minutes. But I hope that you leave today feeling like, ooh, I got some ideas to take some more empowerment. So that's what I'm going to be doing. So, okay. So I promised that we were going to be talking about something positive. Let's start it. So a recent article in the Harvard Business Review has given us some hopeful news for a change. That employers are actually looking for experienced workers to help them through the current crisis. Now, there are companies who are actually creating formal return to work programs. They're called, believe it or not, Returnships. That's a real thing. They're basically internships for experienced workers that don't need to start from the beginning, but they do need to update their skills, or through direct hire programs, but they're finding that these programs are being successful. So why is it important? Why are they really concentrating on experienced workers? Well, experienced workers have the edge over younger counterparts. They're going to bring to the table things like institutional knowledge, education, work experience, mature perspective, stable life stage, dedication, loyalty, and energy and enthusiasm for returning to work. Now, by the way, if you're in, and I'm 56, I'm of a generation that was taught to take notes. So if you're like me and you're frantically taking notes by now, I do want to assure you that if you fall behind, don't worry. I'm going to be sending you a slide deck tomorrow that has all of this stuff in there. So don't worry if you fall behind in the note taking, you will get this information. Okay. But let's go back to what we were talking about. So, why are employers specifically interested now in this time of crisis with mature workers? Older workers tend to forget to promote soft skills like adaptability, emotional intelligence, mentoring, cool-headedness. But here's the thing, those are exactly the skills that employers are beginning to kind of revisit. When the world has turned upside down, they need people who are actually experienced at being able to stop on a dime, turn and go a totally different direction. And a lot of times younger workers may not have that yet. And it's not because they're stupid or whatever. It's because they haven't learned it. A lot of soft skills or people skills are things that we learn over time. And we do tend to learn them by screwing up. So we just had more time to screw up and learn from our mistakes. And that's basically it. So basically soft skills gap. And by the way, I am here to prove that that actually works. Because the job that I had right before this one was with a tech company where every single person in my department was literally half my age. What they needed somebody with my ability to adapt and to deal with frustrated customers and to be able to move quickly and move on and not kind of fall apart every time things went differently. Okay. Now I'm going to move on kind of quickly here to talk about what has changed since the last time you were looking for work. Now, if you are in maybe the IT field or fields that change rapidly, I know you're going to know some of this stuff. If you have been out of the workforce for a significant amount of time, or maybe you've worked in a sustained employment for many years, you may find that resume writing and interviewing and the job search itself has changed. What used to work may or may not work now. Those of you who work in fields where employment, again, changes rapidly, maybe some of these things you're going to know, but hang in there because there's going to be some things that are going to be right for you guys as well. Now, in this particular section of what's changed, we're going to be talking a lot about the need to match your skills to the skills listed on the job description. And somebody asked earlier in the chat box, what's a Tchart? Well, that's what I'm going to teach at. I'm so excited. We're going to be talking about the vital importance of networking, which, by the way, I would argue is now considerably easier due to technology. So if you are an introvert, you are needing to do this at a really good time, okay? And hopefully I can prove my point to you. There we go. Teleconferencing. Now, this is still the way a lot of people are doing things. I understand that there are more face-to-face interviews happening now, but teleconferencing is certainly popping up, and it's certainly part of our regular lives. And so if you're not used to doing this, we're going to want to get you feeling a little bit more comfortable with it. What else has changed? You yourself. Oftentimes, we don't give enough thought to how we ourselves have changed since the last time we interviewed for a job and how those changes affect how we self-market. And that's something to unpack because it can be both positive and negative. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that. So I'm moving along. I realize, guys, I'm moving quickly. And again, I'll remind you that you're going to get the notes for this because we want to make sure that we have a decent amount of time for questions and things as we go on. Okay, so we're talking about matching the skills that you have with what they say they need. And this is where the T-chart or the T-table comes in. Now, as you folks probably know, historically, resumes were written chronologically, and even some of the interviews were conducted that way. You listed the duties of your most recent job at the top, and you worked your way down from there. Now, in this model of resume, the responsibility was on the hiring manager to make the connection between what you had done before and what he or she wanted, from you now. All accomplishments were pretty much considered important, even if they weren't directly relevant to the job being pursued. By the way, sidebar, chronological resumes are still being used in certain circumstances today. So they haven't gone away. So please don't take from me that you've got a chronological resume that I just immediately chuck it out the window. No, No, I would say if you have any questions about what type of resume is going to be right for you, reach out to a Career Force staff member and ask them to help you decide which type of resume is going to be best to tell your story in your situation. The thing about it is, guys, these days employers want to be able to see directly and quickly the actual experience and accomplishments you have that directly relate to the skills listed on the job description and make you the best fit for the company's needs. So one way you can do this is doing the T-chart or the T-table. So keep in mind, now what I'm going to be teaching you is not something that you share with the hiring manager. This is not something you're going to email them or hand them directly. This is basically an exercise that you're going to do at home to determine your fit. So the first thing you do is you draw a big old T on a piece of paper. Next, you are going to want to list keywords from the job description. So, you're reading the job description, they're going to be telling you what they want. Well, I need somebody with experience recruiting team members, somebody with experience as a human resources business partner, somebody who can work with various departments to determine candidate skills. Next, in the right-hand column, you want to write out your accomplishments and experiences that match with the keyword of the phrase. So they want somebody who has experience recruiting team members. Great. I've exceeded all recruitment goals by attending job fairs and sourcing new applicants from various job boards. They want somebody with experience as a human resources business partner. Great. I'm PHR certified. They want somebody to work with various departments. Great. I've collaborated with hiring managers in the past. So it's basically an exercise of they want this, I've got it, here's how. They want this, I've got it, here's how. They want this, I've got it, here's how. So when you complete this and you're looking at it, it's hopefully going to give you a clear picture of how well you fit the position, and it's also going to give you a preview of the talking points that you're going to want to set up. Okay? So that is, in a nutshell, the T-table and the T-chart and the vital importance of matching the skills that you have with what they say is of value to them. Now, the next thing I talked about is this idea of networking and how vitally important it is. And seriously, the statistics are consistent. 75 to 80% of jobs come from knowing somebody who knows someone. And a sobering reality is that there are many jobs available that will simply not appear on job boards. These jobs are advertised through word of mouth, associations, or company-related websites. So, for example, let's say that you now want to make a career change and get into something that you have never done before. Now, this is actually what I did during the recession, I might add. You want to get back into something that you have done before, but you haven't done in years. Now, the big question for you is, do you have the skills that will make you competitive? And I do talk about competitive, particularly in downward economic times like this, where there are so many candidates out there. You do need to spend a little time thinking about your competition, even though it's not particularly a fun thing to think about. You do need to be thinking about the other people who are going up for the jobs as well. So you're asking yourself, do I have competitive skills? The best people to give you that answer are the ones who are actually doing the work that you're seeking. Find those folks. Ask them to review your resume and give you candid feedback on whether they think you're out of the box ready or whether you need to update your credentials. And for a lot of technical jobs, that you're almost going to have to go to people who are currently doing the job, because at Career Force, unless you happen to stumble on someone with an IT background, they may not be able to give you kind of the detailed, granular information that you need. Networking and informational interviews can assess whether or not you even want a career change, by the way. You may talk to some people in a new field. You may discover, no, that's not really what I was looking for. That's fine. Back out of that road, head down another one. The other thing, too, is that talking to people who are doing the work that you want to do will give you insider tips about where to find jobs and what specifically the employers are going to want to hear. They can tell you things like, okay, the trendy software that everybody's talking about is this, or they can tell you that, yeah, you're great, but you're going to need a certification. They're going to help you with the language that you need to use. Another advantage to networking is that you can find out about the jobs before they have been posted. So if you're talking to insiders, they can sometimes share things like, well, okay, there's nothing in the department right now, but I can tell you they're budgeting for this position, and this sounds exactly what you're looking for, and they're going to know more in July. And finally, more experienced workers are choosing to focus on specific companies or organizations rather than wait for the jobs to be posted. So for a moment now, think about a company that really interests you, or an organization, or maybe a mission statement. Research that organization thoroughly. Review your qualifications, especially skills that you have that are going to be really valuable in this current time of reorganization and chaos and difficulty and uncertainty. Then reach out and meet them. It can be as simple as a quick phone call or an email. Let them know that you are simply opening the door on a possible relationship. You're not expecting them to create a position for you right away. And make sure that the experience with them is a positive one, because the better and more positive you get to know them, the better chances you have of when the next position comes up, they're going to be like, oh, that's right, that Robin person. Let's bring her in and talk to her again. All right, I realize I'm speeding through this, but I'm seeing some things popping up in the chat box, and that's excellent. All right, so let's move on to teleconferencing. All right. And I have to use printed out sheets here because I have fewer screens than I normally do. And what's really funny is I printed it out on really tiny, tiny font, guys. And I should remember how old I am in this particular webinar because I can't see this stuff. Oh my. Okay, so let's talk about teleconferencing, because there's been a couple of people who've said this is the first time they've done webinars and things. So yeah, so teleconferencing is getting to be a little bit more common now. Now that we've got 12 months of major pandemic behind us, a lot of people have been Zooming and whatnot. What I would suggest is, if you haven't done a lot of teleconferencing, that you do practice a little bit, that you try to get connected to friends or family, even as something as simple as Zoom. Don't worry about knowing exactly the platform that the company is going to be using. Remember, they are going to be trying to make this as simple for you as possible. It's not a benefit to them to make a really complicated system that a lot of people are going to be confused. So they're going to make it easier for you. So the good news is you're doing it now, okay? So you've taken a positive first step. You've hopefully written in the chat box. You've logged on. You've hopefully got audio. So this is good. Keep up the momentum. Okay, backgrounds. Here's the thing on backgrounds. If you're not familiar with this yet, there's all kinds of software now that can put fake backgrounds behind you, and you could look like you're sitting in front of the Golden Gate Bridge, or you're sitting in front of a Disneyland cartoon castle or something like that. They have actually polled employers and have asked them, do you like these backgrounds? And the answer is a resounding no, they don't. And if you've ever seen the blurred background, you'll notice the problems with them, because if you move too quickly, the background actually will obliterate half of your head, and it looks bad. Generally speaking, the thing to keep in mind with backgrounds is that it is attractive, but it is not going to be pulling focus from you. Okay. So the idea, in fact, I would say that my background right now is probably a little busier than I would necessarily do in an interview. There's a little bit too much, but it's my home office, and I'm not going to rearrange it. But anyway, simple things in the background. Generally speaking, when they poll the employers, they said bookcases are fine. Artwork, as long as it's not something that, again, people are going to be looking around going, is that a butterfly or what is that? Something that's, pretty obvious what it is. And choose good lighting. This goes part and parcel with good lighting, okay? Make sure that you're not sitting right in front of a very bright window, because then you're going to be in silhouette. And just like a real interview, they're going to need to see your expression. They're going to need to see your eye contact, your smile, and you want to make sure that you are in good lighting so that they can see that. If you're sitting right beside a bright window, you can be washed out to the point where they can't see that either. Now, I am actually using a ring light right now. It is not expensive. I bought it on Amazon, and I do find that these lights can actually help a little bit. Don't feel that you have to spend money on this, but I would say just try various locations out in your house and make sure that you look warm, well lit, inviting, and that they can see you well. Dress as you would for a face-to-face. And I even encourage people to do that down to the shoes. Why the shoes when they're never going to see them? Psychological. You're going to feel differently if you are wearing the entire outfit as opposed to half the outfit. Now, I talked a little bit about good eye contact and smiling, and this is vital for teleconferencing just as it is in face-to-face. Now, because I'm down to one screen, I can do a much better job making eye contact with you than I have in different configurations. And the other cool thing about teleconferencing is you can actually put little post-it notes on your screen right beside. Make sure you don't obliterate the camera, but you can put it right beside the camera to remind you to smile, to remind you to make eye contact, which is something you obviously can't do in a real interview. But yes, psychologically, it is hugely important for them to get at least the illusion, quote unquote, that you're making eye contact with them, and that's looking right into the camera. Okay, audio. Now, I wish I had a really good fail-safe way of making sure that the audio is good. We found at Career Force, just at the year of doing these, we found out the hard way that what works for one person with one setup doesn't necessarily work for everybody. So with audio, you literally have to practice and you have to decide whether, do I just use the audio on my computer? Do I use a headset? Now, these are ridiculously bulky headsets, but I use them simply because I sound better on that, which is the important thing. So you're going to have to play around a little bit with the audio and get people to help you if necessary to make sure the audio is good. And then the last thing that I'm going to throw out, and this actually should be first, because if you take away nothing about teleconferencing, guys, take away this, though. Have a backup phone number handy. You never, ever, ever know when something is going to happen at the last minute. And so you should be able to have a backup phone number to call that hiring manager immediately and say, okay, what should we do now? Okay. All right. So we talked about what things have changed. If you have not been on the job hunt for a long time, what has changed? A lot of times, one of the biggest things is you. You're a different person. And again, especially if you have been out of the job hunting game for a long time, if you've been in sustained employment, chances are you're a very different person than you were the last time you did this. How you feel about looking for employment now, and the question is, do those feelings show? Now, if you're really enthusiastic about the idea, that's fantastic to let it show. But if your feelings are negative, if you still have some emotional leftovers from your last employment or resentment about having to look now, this could be a problem. And what I would do is I would recommend that you reach out to someone in your life that you trust to be straightforward with you. Ask them if they're picking up on any bitterness, any resentment, or if they're just picking up on you're struggling to move on when you're talking about your last position. If they do, if they are sensing a little bit of this, feel welcome to reach out to us. We can help you find ways of talking about your current job search in the most positive and effective way. Now, evaluate your skills. You've accumulated many, many skills, both on the job and just plain living your life. And again, experienced workers tend not to promote the soft skills, which is a mistake. And I think the reason we tend not to promote them is we don't think of them as skills per se. We just think of them as living. But you would be surprised the number of millennial and Gen Z people who still think adaptability is very, very, very difficult. You've been doing it for decades, but they still struggle with that. So be thinking about those people skills that you have that you can bring to the table. Think about what makes you a better candidate today than you were the last time. What have you learned or gotten better at that maybe younger employees have yet to learn? I would say just in my own recent experience, I would say just patience and just having been around the world enough, I know that what goes around comes around, as simplistic as that may seem. So I tend to be calmer about change, and I tend to let things go off my back that I used to take very personally and get very stressed over. So be just thinking about all of the skills that you have that are easier for you now than when you were younger. And finally, what are your goals? Now, they are almost certain to ask you about this, and it's going to be really important for you to have a specific answer. Your goal may be to retire in 3 years, but I would advise you to work with us about the answer to that question carefully. Number one, we want to make sure that it's honest. So I'm not implying at all that you should say something that you don't believe in. But the other thing too is that sometimes honesty can take you out of contention. So that's why I would suggest honestly that you reach out to us. Okay, now I'm speeding through here again. Continue asking those questions, but let's talk about mistakes commonly made. Now, these what I've gotten from this section. This has actually come from employers. This is not me. This is actually employers saying these are the mistakes that we see experienced workers being made over and over and over again. The common stumbling blocks are being seen as overqualified. Yep, that's the biggie. We're going to be talking about that in just a second. Losing momentum on the job hunt, going at it really enthusiastically, and then that energy just kind of letting your narrative be negative. Okay. I've met several people who said, yeah, I'm struggling really with not letting my bitterness show about what I just came from. And then finally, not updating your skills. And again, well, I'll wait until we talk about that before I jump into that. But let's jump into overqualification because that is huge. And that is something that is very real and something that's very challenging. So the most common reason that candidates are perceived as being overqualified is that they have simply listed too many accomplishments on their resume, or they have listed accomplishments and skills that are unrelated to the job that is open. For example, a former restaurant manager, and this example is taken from a real person that I worked with, a former restaurant manager who genuinely wants to obtain a position as just a cook might be sending the wrong message if her resume includes accomplishments like reducing operating costs. Now, that's a great accomplishment, and she's probably really, really proud of it, and she has reason to be, but the hiring manager might wonder if she's going to be tempted to offer advice to her boss about how the kitchen should be run. Now, a better bet would be for her to focus on the skills that they have listed on the job description and not to add other accomplishments, particularly achieved at a higher level. Now, by the way, in this particular situation, a skills-based resume would probably be the best for scenarios like this. If you are not familiar with the different kinds of resumes and when to use which one, number one, I would check out our resume webinars. Number two, I would reach out to Career Force and sit down and talk with somebody about the options that you have. It's also smart to think carefully about including unrelated accomplishments. A good side of, let's say, for example, that you created a model for neighborhood philanthropy. You created some kind of thing in your neighborhood that gave back, and it got really, really popular, and it gave national media attention, and it was modeled in several states, and it was huge. Now, could the mention of that be sending the message that you would be bored in the job that they have on offer, and that you would move on in a few months to something more challenging? Again, it's kind of wise whenever you're thinking about adding anything. Think about how this will obviously be positively received, but also be spending a little time thinking about how it's possibly negatively received. Now, moving on now to the interview. It's important to remember that generations M, which is what I'm calling millennials, and Generation Z, these folks are going to be, chances are, going to be the ones who are going to be interviewing you. Now, these generations are highly collaborative and team-oriented. Now, if you have been the boss for many years, it can really be easy to slip into boss mode and speak like you did when you were in charge. Now, I'm not saying every time, but that can come across as threatening or off-putting. You might be like me. You might naturally speak with confidence, but sometimes confidence can be misunderstood as being somebody who doesn't necessarily want to listen to teammates or consider their point of view. It's a tricky line to walk, honestly. So again, mock interviewing is a great way to give yourself a chance to practice listening techniques and looking for opportunities communicating communicate that you really look forward to being part of their team and working with them. Okay. Now, another mistake that employers say that experienced workers make is just losing momentum. They just kind of run out of steam. So a lot of seekers, and this isn't exclusively experience, but it seems to pop up more with experienced workers. They start out with loads of enthusiasm and motivation and organization and goals, and then they find out that family commitments pop up, or frustration gets the better of them, or they just lose their drive. So what I tell people is if you're determined to obtain employment, make goals for yourself now, but also seek out a support network that will help you stick to your plan. I always recommend thinking of it as a marathon rather than a sprint. And just like a marathon runner needs hydration and fuel all the way through the race, you will too. Now, you may snag a new position shortly after starting your search. That's great. That's wonderful. But don't beat yourself up if it doesn't happen. Things are challenging. This calls for endurance. All right, we're almost done here, guys. But I want to talk a little bit about this whole idea of letting your narrative be negative. So a common mistake is unintentionally coming across as negative. As I mentioned earlier, if you have some residual bitterness to a former employer, seek assistance in finding truthful, neutral language to use when talking about them. Because honestly, if a new employer gets the impression that they're interviewing a really judgmental person who's sitting there with a lot of emotional baggage, it's going to be natural for them to choose the other candidate who's just really, really excited about the position and they're really excited about the opportunity. Now, by the way, this is not to say that you create fake excitement. They're going to spot that immediately. But leave the baggage at the door and bring in your skills and accomplishments instead. Be really, really, really careful about word choice. The words fired and laid off are not interchangeable. Laid off means that you lost your job because of your organization. Maybe it closed, maybe it restructured, it downsized, it moved, or there was no longer a need for your particular position. By the way, a lot of people globally have been laid off due to COVID-19. There is nothing to be ashamed about. Okay, that happens a lot. Now, the word fired is really negative. I would suggest a more neutral term, if you want the technical term, involuntary separation. And honestly, I would encourage you to overcome the understandable discomfort and work with our team to talk about those times when, hey, maybe it was your bad, okay? If you were fired, first of all, don't represent yourself as laid off because that's something an employer can check on pretty quickly with a background check. And if they find out the truth, that could be disastrous. Being fired honestly happens more often than you think. And I got this directly from an HR friend of mine. So I think honestly, work with us and we can talk about a good way of talking about that that's positive. Okay. The final area that we're going to be talking about is taking a good look at your skill set. Now, think about it. If you've been employed with the same organization for 30 years, you have a solid set of skills that your particular organization needed you to have. However, when you get out and start exploring other organizations, you may find that other skills are going to be needed. Sometimes it's just not enough to be willing to learn. I know it's tempting to kind of lean on that, but think about it. A hiring manager has two candidates. One candidate says, well, I may not have personal experience with this particular software, but I'm certainly willing to learn. but the other candidate says, well, yes, I've used this particular software for the past 3 years in previous positions, and here are my specific accomplishments using it. Now, the importance of that particular software may spell who gets that job. Now, you might be interested in going back to work you did many years ago. Depending on the nature of the work, even a degree may not be entirely what you need to be qualified. Now, I was a teacher. I still have teaching. I still have a teaching license. It is updated. But the fact of the matter is, teaching has seismically changed since when I went to college. And even though there are still skills that I learned way back when that are still relevant today, I need to add to them a ton of new skills, including how to create relevant training virtually. So there are going to be times when you will need to update your skills. And as I stated earlier, the best people to tell you this are the people who are currently doing the job. Now, we have various things that will help you. Dislocated worker services is a great to obtain shorter term training like licensure and certification. And there are others. Now, I think this is an older screen, and we still talk about Coursera, which just shut down. So talk to us about that. It's a little different than it was when I created this screen. Okay, I'm coming to a screeching halt now. I only overtalked by 10 minutes, but we still have a good amount of time to talk specifically about what you guys want to talk about. So, Marnie, let me know, what are the people saying? What do they want to talk about?
Okay, I'm going to start with a zinger that I just loved, a person after my own heart.
Okay.
He says, and this is somebody who I believe has done all the workshops, and kudos, but welcome to the new folks. He says, I hope you can talk more about the age factor because there are other workshops for other questions. So we'll start out with those other questions, and Robin will give you the short and sweet.
There we go.
I need to find a different career, but I have no idea what I want or what pay I can expect. Can you recommend a way to explore that what I might be qualified for?
Absolutely, absolutely. So we have some online tools on careerforcemn.com that are designed to do this very thing, and there's several of them. The first one is an interest assessment, which is basically going to reiterate what kinds of things you are naturally drawn to and what jobs are in those areas. The other one is a little bit more practical. I always like that for the practical minded because you can put in what you did before and they will spit out a list of possible new jobs, and they're going to be arranged in the order of what could you possibly step into with no additional training, what could you possibly step into with shorter term training, and what jobs are related to what you did before but might actually require more intensive training. So I would say start with that. The other thing that you can do is you can go online. I'm a big believer in just something as simple as Google. Job suggestions for people who are interested in art, job suggestions who are interested in working with kids, all kinds of things as that. And then finally, I am a huge believer in the informational interview and getting out and meeting people and talking with them. You can do that electronically very easy, and you don't even have to leave your house. And we will assist you with that. Since I'm shooting for the short and sweet here, I'm not going to spend any more time on that. But I will say that we will give you as much time as you need if you want to come to us with more specifics. Yep.
Okay, this person says I have worked at the same place for 28 years. Are there resources for resume help?
Yes. Yes, we've got webinars that'll give you kind of the quick version. We do not write resumes for you at Career Force, but we absolutely will help you if you come to us with, kind of a shell. What we ask for you to do is try to get something put together. And by the way, we have some templates that we're more than happy to give you. So you can kind of follow this idea of this is the way you do a skills based, this is the way you do a chronological, do your best, and then send it to us, and we will be more than happy to dig deeper into that as well. So yeah, the short answer is we have a ton of resources. Reach out to us.
If you could reiterate this, would the T table or chart go right into the resume?
No. The T chart, the T table is something that you're going to be doing yourself, and you use it for lots of reasons. I start a T chart the moment that I see a job description that looks interesting to me. And I do it first to determine, do I match it enough so that I feel confident going for that job? The next time that I use it is I pull it out for the resume, because that T chart is going to determine how I set up my resume and what I put on the resume and what I don't put on the resume. And finally, I use the T chart and T table when I'm practicing my interviews and I'm coming up with what possible questions could they ask me in this and how am I going to answer it. So it is simply an exercise that you use, and in theory, nobody else should see it but you.
Someone wants the verbal do's and don'ts in an interview.
Oh, okay. Don't swear. Don't be rude. Do smile. Honestly, the thing about it is make it about your skills and accomplishments and how you fit the job. Okay. And by the way, in terms of the zinger where we started, I wanted to come back to that a little bit because I think honestly it touches on something that people are thinking about. This idea of the elephant in the room being how old you are, and do we, are we ever going to get away from that? Here's my feeling about it. I got hired by a millennial-led company where literally everybody I talked to is half of my age. Now, I'm not kidding anybody. People take a look at me and they know that I am not a spring chicken. How did I do it? I did it because I had skills they needed. And that's honestly really what it gets down to. The number of people who are going to discount somebody completely simply because of their age, yes. Do they exist? Yes. I'm not going to say otherwise. That would be silly. But they're not in the great number that you think they are. People are looking for people who are going to effectively meet their needs. That's what you're going to want to talk about. That's what you're going to want to emphasize. That's what you're going to want to bring everything back to, is how I can give you what you need. And if you do that effectively enough, they don't care that you've got gray in your hair. What they're already thinking about is, great, we're going to have this person do this, and we're going to have them do this, and we're going to have you do this. And that's going to be what's rolling through their mind, not, oh gosh, they remember the 70s. Can you tell I've been thinking about the 70s a lot? Lots of 70s music this week. Okay.
Robin, how can these folks get computer skills that they need?
Oh, super. Okay, so basic computer skills, because it kind of depends upon where you are at in terms of your needs. We have got, and we can throw this into the packet that I sent tomorrow, by the way, we've got a couple of free options online. So if you are looking toward, I just sent this to a woman today. She said, I'm completely comfortable with Word, but I'm not as comfortable with PowerPoint and Excel and some of the other Microsoft programs. GCF Learn Free I have used for years. I just like that site. It's totally free. The training is really digestible. It is easy to follow. You can do it in short snippets, so you're not dedicating yourself at the computer for hours on end. And they will give you a opportunity to take a quiz at the end to see how you're doing, and a certification of completion, which is great. Microsoft itself, of course, offers a formal certification free program online that you can do to learn their products as well. So I would suggest that is for the lower end. For the upper end, again, it will depend upon, if it means learning a software in your particular area. I'll give you a do-it-yourself at home bit of advice. When I wanted to go back into training, and I knew that using software for instructional design was going to be a part of my life that wasn't when I was back being a teacher, what I started to do is I started to research teaching and training positions, and I started learning what was the software that kept popping up, that they kept mentioning. Sure enough, those software programs actually had 30-day free trials. So when I was unemployed, I had no money, I had no resources. I was living outside of the Twin Cities. It was challenging. What I did was I would sign up for those 30-day free trials, and I would spend those 30 days teaching myself the software and accomplishing things, and then I would back out before they hit me for the money. So there's different things that you can do. And then again, I would say research and networking to be able to find out, hey, who's using what and how do I get myself trained on those? Okay.
There was a question about, do we know any companies in Minnesota that are currently offering returnships? What I would
Um,
advise you to do is to use that keyword as a saved search on some of the sites that you're using. I have done that on LinkedIn, and I will tell you they are few and far between, maybe pop up once every other week or 2 weeks. But use your keyword searches wisely if that's the kind of thing you're looking for. And honestly, this may be a big learning curve for employers. They may not have heard of these, and you might need to use your network to teach them and talk them into one.
Couple of other things that I would throw out as well. AARP has been doing some great things. They actually have the AARP pledge of companies that will formally join this pledge and say that we are dedicated not only just to hiring experienced workers, but really celebrating what they bring to the table. So I would spend a little bit of quality time on the AARP site because they will have information as well. Now, there is also a job club. It's the only one that I'm aware of, and I could be wrong on this, but the only one that I'm aware of that is really dedicated specifically to the experienced worker, and that's called Shift. And to find them, it's Shift Online, I believe. They too are closed in terms of face-to-face organizations, but I do believe that they are doing some online and remote work as well. But they are going to be a font of information as well. So check that out as well.
Okay, so someone recently applied for a position, and on the application they asked if they were over 40. Why is it legal for them to ask this on this application? It made her just want to forget about applying. How is this question related to the job itself?
I would say in theory, they should be able to tell you right away. And there's nothing wrong with maybe, finding that out, doing a couple of phone calls and finding that out. There are legitimate reasons, guys, occasionally for asking age. The most obvious one that comes to mind is if it's a bar, they're going to want to make sure that people aren't younger than, what is it, 18. So the thing about it is, it doesn't necessarily have to be shady or discrimination if they're asking that. But you are absolutely right in that you should find out why they are asking that. This question pops up actually more as to what if somebody asks a question in an interview that seems to kind of tend to you're kind of going, well, what do they need to know this information? It's easier in an interview, of course, to simply at that moment say, I'm curious as to what my age or what my answer to this question is going to inform you. Why is this relevant to the job at hand? A lot of times there is a real reason for it. But the person who's asking the question does so sloppily. I don't really know. So I encourage you to find out, but I encourage you also to know that it isn't necessarily what you fear it to be. Does that make any sense? Marty, feel free to jump in if you have anything that you want to add.
No, I think that makes perfect sense. I'm going to rush right along. Um, I'm going to answer this one real quick. Is it possible to send us the link to the Business Review article about companies hiring experienced workers? Yes, we will be sending you
Actually,
all
I
of,
send the copy of the whole article. I've got that. And yes, that's part of the packet. Yep.
thanks so much. And with this group's years of experience comes a certain salary requirement. So do I need to apply for jobs that don't meet those requirements, or can I hold out for positions that do?
Oh, that's totally personal question, and that has everything to do with your situation and where you're at and whatever. Um, how much you're willing to compromise is again, it's a personal decision. If you're really, and then also there's so many factors. I can't give you one answer. There was a friend of a friend I knew that a few years ago had knowledge of judicial docket software, and he was one of the only 3 people in the United States that had this knowledge. He could write his own ticket. He could write his own ticket. He could go anywhere he wanted. He could pretty much name his salary, and they were begging for him. Now, if you work in an industry where your particular position is more common than that, you're not going to necessarily be able to negotiate that. So I would honestly suggest that you reach out to us, tell us your whole story, and let us kind of problem solve with you as to, what you should do, and what are the pros and cons of holding out, and what are the pros and cons of jumping into something.
If you have typed in your whole story today or part of it, please copy that and paste it into an email so that staff can reach out to you and really have a conversation about your personal individual story and strategy. So this person has encountered several employers hesitant to hire due to age and liability because folks in this demographic are more likely to get COVID and it affects their insurance rates. How do you address this?
You can pretty much take a look at any demographic and you can cherry pick possible negatives. We talk about, longevity and loyalty and whatnot. Well, what about individuals who are of the age to have children? And how expensive is that for the company to have those people go out on long maternity leaves? We also have a younger generation that, for whatever reason, is not scared at all to start a job, go through a long, expensive training, decide they don't like it, and quit. So I guess my feeling about it is, again, it always goes back to, you say you want this, I can give you this. Here is my intention. This is what I want to accomplish for you. And this also ties back to this idea of how you are going to answer that where are you going to be in 5 year question. If your if your honest answer is, I'm going to be retired, can you come up with a plan that in the time that you're going to be for that company, you are going to add so much value that it's going to be worth it for them to bring you on for the time that you're going to be there, and take a lead in a particularly difficult situation, or be able to develop a particular group of people, or whatever it is that you plan on doing. So again, this always gets back to, you need to be answering some tough questions about not only what am I going to do, but how long am I going to do it, and how am I going to make it worth their while.
Thanks. If you have a disability and they have a question about disability on the application, does marking yes when they ask, how does it affect you?
Um, and again, that's almost impossible to answer, and I'm not trying to be coy by saying that, because it depends on the person who's reading your answer. Generally speaking, and this is where I also like to go hand in hand with Marnie, because she's got a lot of good advice and knowledge and experience in this. But generally speaking, my years of experience have taught me to be a little hesitant before you start disclosing anything about disabilities. The best way to do is talk about what you can do way before you mention about what you can't. And I suspect that almost everyone I've ever met with a disability has got a real good bead on what they are capable of doing and what they can't do. And they've already made the determination correctly when they went for the job that they can indeed do the job. Maybe with a reasonable accommodation, maybe they don't need one. But I think honestly, the whole point is that you get in there and you talk about what you can do and what you are going to offer them first and foremost. Marty, you want to add anything there?
No, I agree. And when I have questions about this, I reach out to our vocational rehabilitation program, our department here at the state of Minnesota. Maybe last question here. Robin, any advice if you are insecure about your appearance?
That's a cool question. And I say that because I think a lot of people are thinking things like that, but maybe they don't necessarily bring them up. Um, I would say a couple of things. First of all, I always and I definitely, being that I am much heavier than I used to be, and I'm not particularly happy about being that, I can certainly relate to not feeling 100% confident in how I look. One of the things that I like to do is I like to contact the people in my life who can maybe give me some practical help. You would be surprised, at least I guess I'll speak for myself. When I get a new outfit, I don't buy clothes much. And I should buy them more often because every time I do, I actually do feel a lift in confidence. So I think the thing about it is, first of all, look around your particular group of friends and family and take a look at who can help you. I would say the next thing is, again, this is like I'm beating this drum. Think about the experience and the ability that you have and concentrate on what they are needing from you. Because unless you're applying to be a model, in which case, yes, appearance is going to be part of it. But if you're not applying for a position of a model, how you look probably won't have anything to do with it. And a lot of times, it's literally almost just powering through and concentrating on what you can bring to the table. I absolutely, I can totally relate to what you mean. When I went to that first interview at the tech company that I was in, and every single person that walked by me was younger than me and dressed better than me, and I thought, oh my goodness, I'm the grandma in the room. Then I went into the actual office and I had the interview, and he started talking about skills and theories and methods and strategies. And all of a sudden, I was in my element. And I was talking about things that I knew. And the gray in my hair, or whether or not my outfit was completely on trend, went out the window. I wasn't thinking about that anymore. I was thinking about how I could do the job that they wanted me to do. So that's a long-winded, rambling way of saying that I think there are things you can do to minimize that discomfort, and then the rest of it, you have to literally power through. Okay, I just checked, and we're at 11 o'clock straight up, so I promised you that we were going to end promptly. We're going to end promptly. Reach out to us, guys, seriously. A lot of good questions are coming in, and there's going to be more of them. So please reach out to your local career force and let this be the beginning, all right? Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it, guys.